it sounds like something, but are you veteran ready? Are you ready to take somebody from active duty and then transition them to a business world?
Welcome, friends, to a podcast with interesting people. For those of you who have been watching this show, and I know we have a lot of episodes, but if you watch some of the shows in which I talk to combat veterans, we have several shows in the past where we talked about treatment and what's happening to veterans coming out of the service, and some of them needing help, whether it's PTS, whether it's counseling, or whether it's just finding themselves in this new environment, coming out of high-pressure environment where they have to make life and death decisions, into civilian world, into business world, where they have to find vocation, they have to find themselves and restructure how they deal with this world back home. And so we did talk about, in those podcasts, we talked about treatments that are available to help out, kind of square heads straight into this world. But then what do they do next? How do they find work? How do they work at optimal levels? How do they bring their training that they can take and bring to use to companies? Today, my guest, Riley Wilkins from salesplatoon.org, the founder and CEO of Sales Platoon, is going to be sharing what he's doing. He's a combat veteran as well, and he's going to share what he's doing on that front to kind of bring in the next step for veterans coming out of the service and helping them out reintegrate and be, successful, and bringing that talent as well, match it up with businesses. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Riley Wilkins. Thank you for being on the show, Riley. Appreciate you doing this and spending the time to bring in that perspective of what's happening when our veterans are coming out of the services and they are reintegrating in our society, and how can we help them, and what are you doing on that front?
Yeah, so, it's great to spend some time with you, and thanks for having me on the show. It's, so I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps on active duty, and, I didn't see combat. I was a combat journalist. I was lucky in that I never had to go into that engagement, but we certainly prepared for it. And, when I left active duty, it was in, right at 2001, 2002 timeframe. And so there weren't the services that are available today for transitioning military members who are coming out. And so, I watched as I went into the civilian world, that difficult evolution of how do I start to unlearn the methodology and the way of thinking that I had for over 6 years of my life. How do I set that aside and integrate into a society that doesn't really know what to do with me and doesn't know how to take advantage of the things that I had done?
Right.
And so that was a challenge, and so I fumbled around for a while. I spent a couple of years working odd jobs. I started a personal training company, ended up being an executive assistant at an operations for a company before finding my way into a career that actually made sense. But generally speaking, when people look at that resume, they see the Marine Corps, they see combat journalist. If they knew what they were looking for, my DD-214, they see things like, recon NDOC, or all the things that I did or the places that I'd seen. They don't know how do you translate that into a career outside of like the military police, are you going to go into the police force? Are you an IT guy? Maybe we can put you in an IT role. But what do you do with a combat journalist who's now off active duty? Right.
And, that's the conversation that I'm having with a lot of, friends, veterans, different services and different roles that they played, is that no matter if you're a combat veteran or if you're doing support or wingman, what have you, there's a lot of training that the government invested in you to get you combat ready, right? And so having that regiment, having all those tools and all those skills and coming out, and now you're trying to find yourself in this reality, and it's a tough transition for a lot of people. And there are some organizations that are trying to help out, but it's a complex problem. Like I know we talked offline about this a little bit. And what are you doing specifically to kind of help match those? Because there was a conversation about, businesses want to help veterans. Businesses want to, bring them on board and everything, but they need to know how to deal with them, how to maximize the benefit from all the training that they got, because they are very highly motivated, very focused individuals, right? How do you make that translation, right? It's almost like the vocabulary has to be somewhere in there to match things up, right? To help both sides work. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing at Sales Platoon.
Yeah, well, it's really challenging because, again, when you go into the Marine Corps, or any of the armed services, I tried to distill down what it is that we had in common across all branches and everything that we did. And three things that we all had in common is we all went to a boot camp, we all wore uniform, we're all subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. After that, it's a wide thing. And saying you want to help veterans is kind of like saying I want to help an American. It's as diverse of a population with as diverse of a background as possible. And so, how do you reach them? How do you, veteran friendly? It doesn't really, it sounds like something, but are you veteran ready? Are you ready to take somebody from active duty and then transition them to a business world? Taking a veteran off active duty, whether they're in 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, 20 years, or 30 years, and moving them into the business world is about like taking a high school student and then moving them to Prague and expecting them to excel in advanced chemistry. Right. They may be highly intelligent and motivated and driven and a straight A student in the States, but you put them in a different environment with a different set of rules, different set of mores, and how do you make that transition? And so that was really a big piece of my struggle when I went in there. I knew I had like all this, drive and ambition. And, if you knew what you're looking at when you're looking at my background in the military, even before, you'd say like, this guy is driven, but where do we put him in a business? How do we even start to prepare them for, that transition period? I spent 6 years learning it's not a wall, it's a bulkhead. It's not a floor, it's a deck. It's not a porthole or window, it's a porthole. Grab your moonbeam, which is a flashlight apparently, and your go fasters and go running, right? That's a different language.
Well, let's not
Most people
about
have no
sticks.
idea what I was. Yeah, and ink sticks and, your brain housing group and all this stuff that, these words that this drill instructor is screaming at you while they're cutting your hair and you're going through this thing. Now, later, whatever training you got, it's just layers on top of layers on top of layers. In the military, the benefit is I can look at your collar and your shirt, and I know exactly who you are, what rank you are, and how to treat you. I can look at the ribbons that you have on your chest, and I can see where you've been and what you've done, your personal accomplishments. Have you been in combat or not? I can start to get a sense of you within sensory perception within 5 to 15 seconds. How does that translate to the business world? And it's how do I start to unlearn that idea? So even if I take and put them in that, and so there's all these companies that want to help veterans, but it seems to me that, of the 280,000 veterans that separate every year, only 7% of them have college degrees. And most of the people that want to help veterans, they're really saying, I want to take advantage of the training the military gave them in a specific MOS, a military occupational specialty. So you take a comms guy who's IT, who happens to have Microsoft certifications and a top secret clearance and a bachelor's degree and maybe a couple of extra certifications. You go, okay, well, we'll hire him, so we're helping veterans. But what about the 0311 U.S. Marine Infantry? What about the ad infinitum that doesn't have a correlating job in the civilian world? Where do you put them? Right. And those are the ones that have you ever been to a job fair for veterans? I mean, it's depressing. They're generally like a lot of, and there's nothing wrong with this, honorable professions, but, you can go to Home Depot and get a job in the warehouse. You can go to the Fairfax County Police Department if you want to go in the police department. You can go to be an apprentice and go be a journeyman and learn construction. But how do you enter the world of business?
Right.
How do you start if you have that drive and desire? I mean, you have a lot of downtime in the military, and you read a lot. I mean, other than prisoners, I don't know anybody that reads more than you have all this downtime to do stuff. So you take courses, you learn things, and it's how do I start to translate that when you have this kind of natural desire and curiosity? And when you think about it, it's like there needs to be a bridge program for people that are coming out of the military that is not as long as a 4-year degree. But essentially, it's a way for them to take advantage of the skills that they learned. And then for a subset of the population in the military that have what I call mosaic intelligence, the ability to take disparate pieces of information and stitch them together in a way that makes sense. You take a motor T, MOS and a motor transport for those that aren't in the military. And, you give them pieces of 5 different vehicles, and they'll find a way to piece it together and make something that runs. You give an infantry marine, a 300-yard perimeter that they need to secure, and you give them 5 M16s, 2 K9s, some, claymores, and, a squad, and they'll be like, wow, we got, extra stuff. I know how to make that work. They know how to start to assemble pieces of information that are from disparate groups, different places, and stitch it together into a cohesive plan. And we had plans for that. I mean, everything from OODA loops, right? To, 5-paragraph orders, to things that we were trained and embedded on to make decisions in stressful environments on the fly, and because what was at stake was incredible. And we trained for that. But when you go out into the civilian world, how do you translate that? There are different words, there's different language.
So I'm going to, because, government and military, you live in acronym land. It's an alphabet soup of things. For those who don't know what OODA loop is, describe what it is, what it means.
Observe, orient, decide, act. It's just when you find yourself in a situation where you don't know where you are, the first thing, it sounds common sense, but as Mike Tyson so aptly remarked, everybody has a plan until they get pumped in the mouth, right? That's what everybody does. They get punched in the mouth. Then all the plans go out the window. Murphy's Law, first round down range, all the plans go. So it's designed because nothing we ever did in the military, nothing we did made sense unless you're training to go to combat. And then it made sense. Instant obedience to orders. Duck. Why? Why should I duck? Let's have a conversation. No, down. Because if you don't learn that, but that doesn't mean we're automatons either. It's not about that. It's an advanced machinery that it trains a very specific response. It's like if you're a wrestler in high school, like I wrestled. If you're thinking, you're done. You need to have muscle memory programs so you know what you're doing before it happens. You can think 2 or 3 moves ahead, just like a musician. Sight reads 2 or 3 notes ahead, but you need to have that framework. And so when you think about what are the civilian occupations that go along with that, of course, law enforcement, that makes sense, right? But here's an interesting one for you. What about sales?
Right. What
are you talking about?
What are the numbers let's just kind of give the audience a perspective of like how many people exit armed forces every year, so they can get a grasp of like what's the availability, and a percentage of that is people who, I'll let you just kind of step through. I was kind of reading through your website where you kind of lay it out very nicely. So again, people, for those who are listening, salesplatoon.org is where you can find out. Riley has, everything was very well, visualized. I love that. You got pie charts where you kind of show like what's going on when people are exiting armed forces. So, but yeah, for those who are listening, can you just give them a sense of how many people are exiting, how many people are looking for job, and what kind of workforce are we dealing with that would be available if we had the right tools to kind of help them transition into the business world?
Yeah, here's some shocking statistics, okay? 230,000 to 280,000 active duty military are planning to separate over the next 5 years every single year. Of those that separate, 93% don't have college degrees. 53% of them are under the age of 25. And the ones that separate, 3/4 of them, between 65 and 80%, are projected to leave without a job in hand. And the ones that do get jobs are going to have between 3 to 5 jobs in their first 3 years that they're out. So that's a crisis of people that are coming out. And, it's not like, look, I grew up and I had a lot of advantages in a lot of ways, but I also had some disadvantages. I grew up in a very small town. Parents were divorced. I had a single parent home. I ended up in foster care. When I joined the Marine Corps, I was a junior in college. I had different plans for my life than what I didn't know I was going to go in there. I thought I was going to finish my college degree, then go in the Marine Corps. And so when I got out, most of the people in my small town worked in a paper mill. I had never heard about business to business sales other than movies and maybe the occasional article I read. I knew about marketing. I knew about advertising, never heard about sales. And so when you come off active duty, you're limited to what you know. And, when what it's like, it's almost like this perception of the lens of reality is the reality that you came from is what you come back to. So if you came from small town America, if you came from, first generation American, if you came from a group of people that didn't have entry into that, you didn't even know it existed.
Right.
It would be like, it's like taking, again, that a high school student and then taking them to, taking them overseas and getting them in F-16 and expecting them to be able to move in a fire team. They just don't have they don't even know it exists. They don't know perception. And so that's the challenge of, military members, is that they just don't even know what's available. And the world doesn't know what they know either. So it's almost like watching two people that speak different languages trying to communicate. You have to have an interpreter.
Right. What is happening right now that you see from your vantage point for those who are coming out of the services and they're struggling in getting a job or getting qualified for something that they weren't trained before, so now they have that extra overhead. What is it? What's happening on the market? Like, is anybody helping them out? How are they helping out? How are they maybe not helping them out? Like, what's happening that you see or that you saw from your perspective?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a ton of companies that are trying to help, right? I mean, that's compared to when I cat out, so many different organizations are available that they're overwhelmed with options. And again, it's almost like if I went to the doctor, my knee hurt, and the doctor starts talking to me about like, well, what do you think, Riley? Should you get a knee replacement? Or like, and then let's go and look at all the different metals that the knee replacement can be made from, and you should make a decision. Like, right. I don't have any information. And so you're asking me to make a decision about where I'm going to go. It's almost like you're asking me to do an arranged marriage. Like, I'm just going to go and, put all my eggs in one basket and something. So there needs to be, from the military side, we got to do a better job of training them as they transition. And there's a program called SkillBridge that's available, but it's not that well known. And so it's an ability for these guys on active duty 6 months before they come off to get retrained in a new job. And companies can go through a process and be certified. But a lot of the times, again, they don't know what they're looking for. They know if they're looking for the military veteran. So what companies do, that could be improved is a lot of the times it's let's educate you. So we want you to come back and do a 4-year degree. And that is that's really good for certain people. You don't know what you want to do, come off, use the GI Bill benefit, go back to college and figure it out. Not everybody has the luxury of that. Maybe they're married. Maybe they have dependents. Maybe they need to earn a living. Maybe they just don't. It's 4 years from now, and they're already 34 years old, and they don't want to be 38 by the time they graduate college. So they want to do it at night. They need a job. There's really a gap between if you don't have a specific MOS training and a bachelor's degree, it's really challenging. There's not a lot of companies out there that know how to take somebody on active duty and then take them through an apprenticeship in order to put them into a different type of role. And so there is an apprenticeship economy. There's a groundswell of this happening in the States where more and more companies and more people are embracing the idea that traditional 4-year education is not preparing our students for the workforce. So there's more of these apprentices. And so, helping veterans is great. Preparing veterans is better. But teaching veterans what's available through mentorship, through companies like Veterati, who give free one-on-one mentoring between a veteran and somebody on active duty, don't charge for the service. A great concept, amazing guys doing good work. But still, where they leave them off is, now what? It's, again, if you educate someone and you don't give them an opportunity, how do they find that opportunity? Because a lot of our military come off active duty missing what a 4-year degree has, which is, for all of its faults, a 4-year college degree prepares you with a liberal arts education, and it's a transition from high school to the collegiate to the business world. And they get LinkedIn connections, they get people that they know, and when you come out after 20 years of service, you're only 38 years old, but it's a lifetime of connections that you didn't have the ability to make. So how do we start to connect our military in a different way to those so they can start learning and make an intelligent decision about where they want to go in their life?
And I wanted to, you mentioned Veterati, and I wanted to thank and plug Chris over here, Chris Kirksey, who connected us, and he's I know he's doing a mentorship and providing his skills, and he's in business. He's a founder and CEO of Direction.com, and what a perfect example of someone who transitioned from military and started his own business. And I definitely have to have him on the show over here to kind of share his experience as well, because he was very focused, so he exactly knew what he wanted to do. But for those who come out and have one certain set of tools or training, and it doesn't necessarily right off the bat transition or transfer to what businesses need. They need to get some of that training. And like you said, for some, for your college may be the right way of doing it. For others, it may not be. And so you are filling the gap, which is specifically in sales. Tell me, what are the challenges that businesses have with sales specifically, and how and why do veterans coming in, are such a good fit or potentially good fit?
Yeah, so this is my story. So, I came off active duty. I was 26 years old. No one knew what to do with me. Again, my options at the time were, I can go, I give you my options. I don't, but at the end of the day, what I ended up doing was taking a job as an executive assistant. Then I ended up moving into marketing. And through a series of interviews with different people in the organization, I started very much like Veterati does. I just got the idea, let me call these VPs of all the heads of business units within this company and see what they give me 5 minutes of their time. Tell me how you became VP of operations. Tell me how you became VP of marketing, VP of sales. And the one that I had the most affinity to was sales. And part-time, while I was active duty, I actually sold Kirby vacuums door to door. So that was like my bachelor's degree in selling, is in somebody's home selling them a $2,000 vacuum. So I had that skill set, but I also knew when I got out of the military, I had no desire to spend the rest of my life in people's living rooms, cleaning rooms of carpet for them so that I could make money on a commission.
Right.
So in sales, when I went into B2B sales, I thought, what happens sometimes, and there's a lot of benefit in the military, and one of the things that companies have to be aware of is that in the military, we assimilate very well. We know how to pick up and move and go to a new duty station, new unit, new group of people, meet and bond quickly, and there are unwritten codes of conduct and mores that you don't break. And negative assimilation is a big thing, because you take a hard-charging person who is driven and wants to be successful, but you put them on a team that maybe necessarily isn't that same way. It's being that standout person, being that person about themselves and marching to the beat of their own drummer. It's a challenge. Like, if there's not clear direction around what success looks like. And so for me, it was making that transition was really challenging, because the people that I was assimilating with weren't necessarily very good. To be candid, we were the worst performing team in the worst performing region in America for T-Mobile. So it's like not a very high bar to set, right? So, and I was the newest rep. So therefore, the guy on your podcast is the worst performing rep in the history of T-Mobile in 2003, right? It was not a good situation. And so, but the thing is, how did I end up going from there to becoming the number one rep in that region, number 4 rep out of 450 reps in a year, to get promoted to sales manager, to then get promoted to sales director, and then continue my career and because sales is the only job in the world you fail 90% of the time and we consider it success. So that kind of resiliency, some of that came from childhood, some of that came from just internal. But when you're pushed the way we're pushed in the military, especially in, the Marine Corps and these guys that were, in these special forces units, you find this inner reserve, this switch that's, it's a different level. And, sales will beat you down. It does not care about your degree, your education. All it cares about is, can you look in the mirror and say, what did I do? How can I fix this? And I wish I could say it was like some great Dave Goggins moment. I came home, I was ready to quit. And my roommate, Josh, was like, dude, you got to pay rent. You can't quit your job. And I was like, that's right. And then he said, weren't you a Marine? I thought they didn't quit. And then it's like, oh, God, now I'm going to get this guy. And you pulled that card. So it was and I went and checked a book out, and it was like a Bible. It's this guy, Steve Schiffman. I read his book, and I was like, that's exactly what's happening. And I started, wait a minute. You know what? It's harder not to do my job and pretend like I'm doing my job than just do my job. And I really went back to that boot camp when it was like, you knew you weren't going to ever impress the people there. It had to be, am I pushing myself harder? And that kind of, if you'd looked at my resume and you really looked at what I'd done, you said, that's a guy that challenges himself, and he's probably going to succeed, because when he gets to that crucial point, he's going to make the 5 more calls. He's going to look in the mirror and have the accountability like Goggins talks about. And I did that. And because of the people around me, I said, you know what, I'm going to throw myself into this. And I did everything, but I didn't care anymore about that team. I didn't care about these other guys. I was just going to do the best I could. And a funny thing started to happen. I started to close sales. because it's a process. It's not SMEAC. It's not situation, mission, execution, administration, command. It's not a 5-paragraph order, but it is very similar. It's El Rio, listen, reword, isolate, overcome. There's only 5 things that somebody can say to you in a sales call when you're selling time. You're selling time, not the product. It's a stage. You're staging from one to the similarities came back. It was almost like this moment where the dam burst, and I was like, wait a minute, I already know how to do this. Mm-hmm. I've been trained on this. I was just using the wrong acronyms, the wrong language, and the wrong approach. And that, my job in the military, as the people that use the rank didn't deserve to have it. You always had absolute responsibility with very limited authority. And, the most deadly fighting force in the world that I know of is a 4-man Marine fire team, because any person can move up to the next role and take over. It's like a 4-headed dragon. And it's that training that we had gotten that started to come back to me. And then I started to figure out a way to replicate it. And I realized there was a pattern behind this. And that if I replicated the pattern, I could replicate the success. And then starting to use that and couple that behind the things that I was learning became my pattern for success. And so that was the beginning of learning that, like, sales in the military and what I learned, there was such a direct correlation. But the challenge with sales companies, you asked earlier, is the challenge they have is, where do I find and source high potential sales recruits? Because you can't teach that. It's just like the military. It's like going, the guys that went to Indoc, or the guys, like, we had a high burnout rate. Like, there was 80 people in the recon Indoc I did. We started 80 plus people. We lost the first 40 in the first 4 hours. They lost me after another couple hours. I just woke up in a ditch because I had passed out, because I had just thrown myself into it. But the point is that, like, where is that in the civilian world? How do you find it? Well, a 4-year degree doesn't prepare you for that.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Privilege doesn't prepare you for that.
It may give you theory, but then there's the real world out there, right? When people have to be, on the phone or just dealing with prospects and having that grit. And I think that's kind of like part of the secret sauce that you get people coming out of the military. There is that grit, because when you can't push any further, you have to find that extra 40% and continue to push forward, right? And a lot of people would just
it's the grit.
Screw that. I'm not going to deal with that, and I'm out, right? But it's that extra. I think it's that extra characteristic that veterans are bringing into the table, and so what So we're talking about for the transition. Let's paint a picture for the audience over here. You're highly trained, focused, organized. You got all these things entrenched, and you're indoctrinated to kind of follow the rule set. You're coming out. You can't find, unless you're very specialized, maybe IT, maybe languages, maybe things that are kind of naturally, maybe more easily sellable in the marketplace. But for those who don't have that, specialized training that is, in demand, then sales is one of the options. And then what is it that so you engage with them before they leave the service? When do you engage with those veterans to kind of give them that opportunity to prep and have those the sales tools?
Yeah, ideally we're engaging with them before they leave active duty, because they're still, if they can get into the Skill Bridge program, we're approved through that program. We've got a cohort now. And so getting into that program gives them the runway as they're leaving active duty. And so we're actually focused on the MOSs that kind of no one else wants. So the infantry, the EOD. I have a young Lance Corporal, E3 in ours right now. He's an infantry Marine, but his unit deployed to Okinawa. He has 9 months on his enlistment. See, what's he going to do? He's going to sit around and paint rocks and rake sand for 9 months waiting to get out. Well, right. Up to 6 months before, he could be in our program learning a trade, doing an apprenticeship, really getting a chance to do it, because sales is an apprenticeship. And the challenge with hiring, going back to that, is that if you look at most job ads, they ask for a minimum of 1 year sales experience. The reason that we do that is I moved up from sales rep to sales manager to sales director, and I learned how to lead and develop people, which is a story in and of itself. It's also a piece of that ethos that we learned in the military, which is, going from E3 to E4. You go through the non-commissioned officer school, you go to corporal's course and sergeant's course, and then staff and CO course, and you learn how to lead. There's very little of that in the civilian world. You go from being a sales rep to a sales manager, and you get almost no training at how to hire, onboard, and recruit. And so there's a tremendous burnout in that first year for people that think they want to be in sales and that wash out. And so essentially during the course of a year, like we're going through the Department of Labor apprenticeship right now to get certified, because what they look for is 144 hours of classroom training and 2,000 hours on the job training. So if you're going to be a construction worker, a journeyman, apprentice, an electrician, they look for a minimum of that in order to get a program approved.
Right.
But the 144 hours is easier than how do you actually deploy? And so when you talked about, military terminology, again, we use the terms TLO and ELO, right? Terminal learning objective, enabling learning objective. Most of the trainings, most of college is terminal learning objective. Most of the courses you can take are terminal learning objectives. Take our online course, take our sales training, take our, fill in the blank, spend $5,000, go to our week-long boot camp for sales, and you're going to come out and be a salesperson. No, you're not. You might as well go take a week-long course, an online course in boxing. It doesn't do any good. It's like you have to get into the ring to find out what it's actually like to get hit. And in sales, you're going to get hit. And so what happens when you get hit? You need a feedback loop. You need somebody that's been there before. Like, we don't train our Marines by hiring contractors to come in and boot camp. We get Marines, then we train them how to train Marines, then we make them drill instructors, and then they take you through the process. But we take sales reps, make them sales managers, and then directors and VPs, and give them no training. And how do I instill those disciplines into a rep? So how do you figure it out? Trial and error. And so you essentially are looking for that 1 year. So what we do is we get them before they leave active duty. We break it into 4 phases in 14 weeks. So same as the Marine Corps boot camp. I figure if I can take a civilian and the Marine Corps can move me over 14 weeks and turn me into a Marine and change my life forever, then the Marines and the Army and the Navy and the Airmen and the Coast Guard, they deserve more than 2 days when they leave to make the transition back.
Makes sense.
And so what we do is take them through 4 phases. The TLO, so you learn what you're doing. M16A2 service rifle shoots, range 500 yards, whatever. Shoot. ELO, in the prone, kneeling, and standing position, squeeze off 50 rounds in these intervals and hit a dull target from 100, 200, 500 yards, right? That's the ELO. So what we do is in phase 2, they start doing the ELO. They start to make calls. They start to do outreach. They start to, under the watchful eye of someone that's done it, like myself, over 20 years developing and leading and building sales teams, because I know what I'm looking for. And I know they're going to hit that moment where they need a word of encouragement or a word of correction. They're going to need to know how to focus. But that's just, again, part of the job. There's 5 components that they need to know if they're going to succeed in a career in sales. And only one of those is the selling methodology, whether it's Challenger or whatever you want to go after, medic, whatever philosophy that you have. The other one is, what are the sales tools you're going to use? We wouldn't dream of putting somebody into combat without teaching them how to operate a claymore and utilize a rifle. And yet we take, these guys out of these trainings in colleges and throw them in CRM. What's CRM? What's LinkedIn? What's LinkedIn Sales Navigator? I never heard of this. How do I use it? How do I create these plans? So we use the actual tools themselves so they learn how to use it. And then we create an environment where they're actually selling, where they're doing one-on-ones, forecasting, pipeline reviews. So they're getting a sense of what it's actually like to be a sales rep. And of the group that we started, we lost around 40% of that first group in that first 4 weeks because they realized this wasn't the right role for them. And that's good. We want them to figure that out early because then they and they went to another fellowship at Hiring of Heroes. Now they're one's at a records administration clerk. The other guy was a top secret clearance captain in the Army. It made sense for him to go and do that. And that's great. That's a great service. I'm happy that we did that for them. But for the others, it's amazing to watch the transformation that's happened. And they're only 6 weeks in right now. And it's like the difference in the way they think, the difference in the way they approach situations, conversations. It's really makes me feel like I'm doing something worthwhile because they're going to go into a world and they're going to be at least as good, as not better than Susie Sorority and Frankie Fraternity. And then they're going to bring all that training behind them.
So I'm glad that you have this, and you have a very comprehensive process. And to really fully appreciate it, folks, if you're listening to this, just check out salesplatoon.org because Raleigh has has everything's very well structured and very well kind of laid out, how the program works. So you'll get everything in detail over there as well. Especially if you're a visual person, you get all those aids to kind of see the program that he's built. And the question that I have for you is, business-wise, how does this get funded? Who's paying for this? I mean, 14 weeks. This is a and this is very intense. And you probably, how is this executed? Who's paying for that? How does that work? And how salesplatoon.org can be helped out to kind of scale this up, because there's a lot of people coming out, and a lot of people will need these jobs. So I know there's 3 questions in here, so I'll let you unpack that.
Okay. No, I appreciate you're testing my sales ability, so it's good. So we'll start with, first of all, how Sales Platoon funded. So that's an easy one. So it's self-funded. This is my money, my company, 100% funded by money that I'd saved up over the time I'm doing it. And I did it and it didn't start this way. It started as an answer to a question. How do I solve the issue that most companies have for my role, which was sales manager, sales director, sales VP? But for sales managers, how do I start to solve issues for them? Because they're moving into a role where it is not like going from being a person who's a help desk person who goes to managing a group of help desk people. It's literally like going from being like a fire team leader on an infantry marine to going to be like a battalion commanding officer. Like, you all of a sudden are being pulled into hiring and training and developing, but you also have to carry a book, and you have to do deal coaching, and you have to do meetings with marketing, and they're asking for projections and forecasts, things you had no training on. Right. And so I originally started the organization and called it Corporal's Course and was working on them. The problem was economies of scale when you're trying to move a market. And if you're trying to move a market that's not moved a place before, the lesson I learned for anybody that's listening is you better have a lot of money or a lot of time, and probably both, because the money's going to run out before the world changes to your way of thinking. Right. So as I started, though, I got to have great conversations with CEOs and VPs of sales at amazing companies. And the number one issue that kept coming up is, we can hire, and this echoed my own experience, I can hire pretty well entry-level, early career people from May to August when they graduate college. But where do I find people from August to May? Because the business challenge is that there's no other role that I know of other than salespeople who directly impact the company's growth trajectory at such an early point in their career as these early career salespeople. Like, I carried a quota of $50,000 a month when I was an account executive. So in the course of a year, the company was relying on me to bring in $600,000. So on a sales team of 10, we're talking about $6 million that a manager is managing of just top line revenue that they got to bring in. When I lose somebody from my team, it's not like that quota just evaporates. That sales manager gets stuck with it. And so they are negative $50,000 every month till they put somebody in seat. Right. And even when they put them in seat, they start at $0. So month one, they might have no target. Month two might be 5,000 and 10,000 and 15. Then the third month is 20. They call that a ramp time. So the gap, the N minus, the algebra equation is, how many people am I losing a year? How quickly can I backfill that position? How long does it take me to ramp? And how do I get them to stay long enough so that they can start to be productive in my organization? And most companies vastly underestimate that. So I created this thing called an Attrition Calculator that's available on my site. And just download it and put your numbers in there. You're going to be shocked. On a sales team of 6 million, of 10 people, $6 million that experiences 20% attrition, 2 people, meaning like one quits because they didn't work out and one you promoted to another team, the impact of that with a 6-month ramp and in about a 60-day gap in the backfield, you find somebody, which are great numbers. If you could do that, you'd be world class, is anywhere between $850,000 and $1.2 million.
So that's the vacuum. So that's a vacuum that's created. So that's a vacuum that's created when someone quits or gets fired and things like that. It's not simple.
And
it's not as simple. And it's not as simple as just kind of let's plug in another person and they're ready to go. That ramp up that you mentioned, the training that they may need to have to be specific for the company that they are being hired for. All of that is basically just dragging the numbers down for the salespeople.
Yeah, and then if I go hire a new person, I have no guarantee they're going to be any good either. So if I have somebody that's at $20,000 or $30,000 a month, I won't get rid of them if I'm a sales manager and it's like Q3. I'm going to fire somebody in August who's bringing in $30,000 a month. They're going to go down to 0. I got to cover the quota, and then I got to try to ramp somebody else for the rest of the year. It doesn't make good sense. There's a misalignment that if there was a constant stream of candidates that I could rely on that I knew were going to be high quality, I could solve the business problem. So I started on a mission. Where can I find them? So I started, outreach to, in Chicago alone, there's a guy named Shelton Bank who's doing amazing work, diversity, inclusivity in the south side of the city, trying to get people that wouldn't normally be in business roles. We started working. Nosa Eeg from Prolific Company takes NFL players and professional athletes and gets them retrained. Where is the biggest university in the world that I can get a hold of, that I can get people that are coming out that maybe just don't know what they want to be when they grow up? And I thought, wait a minute, isn't this your story? Weren't you an actor? Didn't you come off acting? I wonder how many people come off acting. And I saw 230,000. I saw those numbers I gave you earlier. Yeah. And I thought, there's got to be a program. Somebody must have put something like this together already. I mean, maybe I can just join that company. I mean, the whole reason I went on my own was to get economies of scale to be able to help as many people as I can. I've had angels that have helped me throughout my career, and I've always tried to give it back, and try to build other people. At some point, Darren Walter taught me it's not leaders don't create followers, they create other leaders. And it's like, and that was an ethos we learned in the military. And I started doing that. So I thought, okay, let me see if there's a program. There's not, if you come off in the SkillBridge program, there was nothing for these guys to go do B2B to go into sales, because to even know how to translate that skill set, you would have had to do it. But how many former vacuum cleaner salesmen do you know who are on active duty, who were Marines, who got out, who went into sales, worked their way up from account executive to SVP of sales, and then left that career at 40 years old in order to go try to create a company? You would have to do that. You have to be insane.
I'm going to answer that. Me. You're the only one that I know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a unique thing. So to answer all the questions, so self-funded, the business problem that it solves, and what it does is it's solving that issue. Because if you're going to solve that issue, you have to do one of three things. You have to find better candidates faster. You have to ramp them quicker, and you have to get them to stay longer. Well, I've got a source of candidates, we do, the U.S. military, that you have to know how to tap into, and you have to speak that language. I'm lucky that I'm bilingual in that way, right? So I know how to meet those guys and bring them in.
Let me just reiterate some of the numbers over here. Yeah. This is from your website where you provided, which is 52% of active duty members that separate. Again, we're going back to the every year 230 to 280,000 military members separate from active duty. 52% of them are under age of 25, and 60 to 85% leave without a career path or job offer. So obviously some of them, that's a huge number. That is a huge number. How do you scale up what you're doing? Because that's a tremendous number of people. How do you scale that up, or how do you want to scale that up? Is it even possible to scale this up so to get that many people trained into this? I mean, even assuming at 40% or 60% failure, let's say, of like, all right, this is not, I tried it, this is not for me. Even at 40%, 50% of that, let's say that's still like over 100,000 people that would potentially be very, very good sales people.
Well, potentially, and that's the thing is, like, it's just like anything else, you learn this. I mean, when you get into a ring, you're going to have a natural reaction one of two ways when somebody hits you. You're either going to recoil or you're going to attack. It's natural, it's ingrained, and you just learn to deal with it. I was the attack berserker, guy who lost all bearing the second I got punched. But everybody has their thing. You won't know until you're in it. There's no amount of preparation that can train you for B2B sales. I'm not talking about B2C sales, a totally different engine. Right. But business to business requires a very specific type of intelligence. And that type of intelligence combined with a certain type of resiliency, you can develop it, but it has to be proven, and you need to have the desire. So can it scale? Absolutely. But it needs the help of companies who, the challenge is, like, what do I even do with a military member that would show up? I tried working for a while with a company, and I thought we were pretty close to working together on this, and there was just a partner. It wasn't a company they were going to get placed at. But they seemed to think that the idea was we needed to find the people with a skill set, and then the most important thing was finding some place for them to go. And that's kind of like saying it's important to find like a high school athlete who's really good at volleyball, and then taking her and moving her like, a combat theater in Kosovo. Like, the thing in the middle is pretty friggin' important, Bob. you know?
Right.
And so how do you get them into that thing? And so that's where our disagreement came from. And they wanted to call it screening. I called it boot camp. And that's how Sales Platoon was born. So the goal is we'd love to get, the goal is, the big, hairy, audacious goal is to get 1,000 military members placed over the next 3 years into organizations and sales roles. So how does a company help us? Well, here's number one. I don't charge the veteran anything. I never will. Right? I think that they already paid the price for this over the course of 4 years or 6 years or 8 years or 20 years. And I can't in good conscience charge them for something that was freely given to me. So how do you do that? But there are companies that do that. They charge $15,000, $20,000. And, oh, don't worry, if you don't have it, then what we'll do is we'll just take it out of your first year's salary.
Right.
Like, whoa. It's like, and there's a lot of sharks in the water. Now, there's great organizations. Hiring Our Heroes does amazing work. But unfortunately, one of their requirements is that 4-year degree. So the apprenticeship model makes sense, and smart CEOs get it. They go, you know what, I do have a hiring issue these months of the year, and if I had a source of that, but how do you de-risk that first 100 days? So what I'm willing to do is go to organizations now and say, look, I challenge you. I challenge you to take a military member and put them on your sales team, but put them through our sales training first. So I'm going to get them, we'll find them, we'll take them through our 14-week program, we'll put them in your company in internship while they're still on active duty, so you get a chance to try them out before you hire them. But you make a commitment now, the financial commitment to us. Now here's the statistics. If you tried to develop this inside your organization, it would cost a tremendous amount of money. And there's some companies that do a really good job with onboarding. But for the average SMB size company, 10 to 50 sales reps, maybe up to 100 sales reps, they have a sales training function. But how do you train a military member to be ready for that? Right. It's almost like, the delayed entry program when you go into the military. Like, you got to get some information before you go. Take the TOEFL before you go. You got to be able to pass the test. There's certain things that we do to prepare you. And so we challenge them and say, like, if you're going to hire a recruiter, an average recruiter, most sales managers like myself were highly skeptical recruiters, because contingency recruiters, they say, okay, we'll get 22 to 25% of the first year's salary, and we'll send you a ton of resumes. Well, yeah, that's not training them. That's not teaching them. How do you get them on board? A retained search firm like Korn Ferry, like the premiers, they'll charge 30 to 35% of that first year's full year salary. So on an entry level role, you're talking about, again, somebody you're paying $60,000 a year to all in, you're paying $20,000 for a resume that's been vetted, but you're not getting any training. And I said, how can I build a business model that makes financial sense, that makes sense to the business? So when I talked earlier about that gap that's caused, the gap of, how long does it take me? For every month, I can bring that simple thing. So you have 60 days open, I can reduce it to 30 days. I just gave you anywhere between $180,000 to $120,000 back. If I can make them ramp quicker because their first 90 days are spent with Sales Platoon versus in your organization, if they normally take 9 months, I'm not a math for Marines. 9 minus 3 is 6, I believe. Yeah. So it's like 6 months. Now I just gave you $150,000 back. So if I had a solution that cost $120,000, it would be worth it. And if I was a recruiter, I would be insane because I'd be doing all the charging. What we ask companies to do is say, make an investment with us that you would with a recruiter. And then contracting, commit to hiring one. That will fund Sales Platoon for us to hire and train 2 to 3 people that come through. And we can scale this thing up. But what we need now is seats on the airplane. I need companies that say, we'll commit to 1, but we need to hire 20. Great, give us 10% of that. And I guarantee you at the end of a year, if you stack up our military veterans who've gone through this training with the average college graduate, they will at least be as good. Give them a chance. They don't want help. I didn't want help. Give me a shot.
Yeah.
That's all we got to do. And and they come with tax credits. So
right, I was going to ask
it's
you,
like,
what I was going to say, for those companies, especially small, medium size companies that may not be familiar with what are the other benefits of hiring a veteran? What are some of those benefits?
Yeah, there's a couple benefits come with it. So it depends on how long they were in to begin with, and where they were deployed. But most military veterans coming out right now served in some kind of combat or theater. Some come out injured with different injuries. I mean, the majority of injuries that happen in the military don't happen in combat situations. They happen in training incidents, or they happen, in all kinds of ways, torn ligaments, So they've got some type of a rating, which is going to qualify your organization for a tax credit. And there's an organization, Veterans Tax Credit, Craig Washburn does, and it helps companies navigate that kind of complex arena. But that's available just for hiring and retaining a military veteran. But you need to identify them before they come to your organization, because there is paperwork you need to file. And so this, again, we give the runway that they're going to come before they get there to you. So there's that piece. The other one is that they have access in the military community. So, for example, if you have a company and you want to work with the government and you need to have salespeople that have secret clearances, almost everybody in the military had at least a secret clearance when they come out. At least in my MOS we did. And that could cost a company $5,000, $7,000 to get. All they need to do is renew my clearance. They don't have to do that. So it essentially, when they're doing it, there's benefits of that, but there's also the military network. When I do blind LinkedIn outreach to somebody that's not in the military, I might have a 1 in 6 shot getting a response back. When I reach out to another Marine, I don't care if they were in 1971 or 2011 or 2020, they see Marine Corps on there and they go, accept, because it's a brotherhood. Yeah. It's a sisterhood. It is a connection that we have with one another that goes beyond any fraternity. And it's that entry point. So don't think just because they're coming in the military, they don't have a community and they don't know how to create relationships. As a matter of fact, they know how to do that very well, but we have to be taught things. I'll give you a great example, tact. Tact in the military means something totally different than it does in the civilian world. I don't know how many times in my career people pulled me aside and said, Riley, you think you're a candle, you're like a blowtorch. And I was like, really? I toned that way down. And they're like, we know you're trying. Keep working at it. Because we have to be tactful in the military, because if you don't communicate with tact and poise and bearing and exactly what happened, there's no time for mincing words. People's lives are in danger. Short, to the point, direct. You suck at this. You're good at this. Fix that. We don't care about that. You do that in the civilian world, you're going to be in HR.
That's right. So this brings me to...
So how do you... this is where we train them in those 5 things.
Yeah. So this is what's happening on the side of the training of veterans, and that's part of your training as well, right? You kind of help with that vocabulary and like, hey, you need to get up to speed with what HR world is like right now, but there's a counter sort of like side to that, the other side of the spectrum, and this is something that we talked offline, and I'm pretty excited about that as well. But I wanted to kind of bring it up for others to hear about it, especially companies and businesses that will be listening to this, which is, you think you are veteran, ready, not even veteran ready, veteran friendly, right? But are you veteran ready is what you said initially. And what does that mean?
Yeah.
So what is it that you're doing on your side? How is your HR department, human resources department, ready for, accepting these veterans, especially knowing that they are, they have this very much ingrained that military training, that kind of, matter of fact speaking, that kind of no nonsense approach to things, which, may need to be kind of, adjusted, or on your side, you may need to be able to kind of communicate using the same kind of tools and train your own staff to kind of figure out how to best operate with veterans. So that's, I think, the other side of kind of the pie that hasn't been probably touched yet. Maybe someone has done anything like that, but I think there'll be such a great and valuable training or plan or program or what have you, whatever that could be provided to these companies, so that you exponentially, secure, or you basically increase the level of engagement from your side as well, and make that fitting better on both sides, right? You provide these guys trained over here, guys and gals, and then this side over here is ready to receive them. It's not only plugging it in, but also making sure that the receiving end properly functions to kind of work as a nice, a good machine, right? So super excited about, maybe you're going to be tackling some of that as well, because that's probably the next step to kind of help them. And this whole rant that I just did right now over here has a point, and the point is, what are some of the challenges that you see as with Sales Platoon to kind of work with the businesses? What is the number one challenge that you have, other than probably awareness, because businesses are probably not aware of what you're doing and how awesome service you can provide for them. So that's one thing. But what other challenges do you face when you're trying to kind of bring in veterans to the business and have them be ready, not only, friendly, but be veteran ready?
Yeah, well, there's really two parts to that, and it's a great question. And I hope I answered all the other layered questions from before. If not, someone will pick up on it, I'm sure, comment. But, when it goes to being, hey, we're veteran friendly, we want to hire, and I get it, and that's an admirable thing. And I'm sure, like myself, we're embraced the thought that, there's an opportunity. The veteran ready has to do with the fact of it's not a single transition. Like when I got to my first duty station, there were things that I needed to learn that I didn't learn when I was in boot camp. And then I didn't learn when I was at Marine Combat Training. I didn't learn when I was at my E school. You only learn them when you're in the Fleet Marine Force, and you get indoctrinated into these, let's call them mores, right? There's no rule or law that says I can't take my shirt off right now on this podcast. But if I did, it'd be kind of weird. And the social price for that would be pretty severe, right? You probably wouldn't even publish the podcast. But there's no rule or law against it. Similarly, when these military members go to your business, there's things they're just not aware of. They're used to being told where to be and when to be there. Like, I didn't schedule my own doctor's appointments when I was in the military. Like, they just told me when to go. They told me where to be in formation. And later I knew I had to do that for other people. There's always a rule, a process, and a procedure for us in the military around things that are around our own lives. So there needs to be much more of this soft skills training and preparation for them of how do I navigate these benefits now? Because if they're coming out, they're 25 years old, they don't have TRICARE, they don't have a retirement plan, they don't know about any of that. They didn't socialize through 4 years in college. So it doesn't need to be, don't worry about, you don't have to have some special office set up, but we can help you putting together what we're training them on with things like, where do you go? Who do you ask when you have a question? What are appropriate questions? Buddy them up with someone so that when they show up, they're going to be in stay. They said the number one reason people stay in organizations, and this is outside of the military, is whether they consider having a best friend at work. If they have somebody at work, if you have military members, veterans already inside your organization, help partner them up. Give them that one-on-one time. Take them to lunch. Talk to them about 401k. Talk to them about what it's like to have a career in sales. In sales in general, we do a really bad job as sales leaders explaining what sales looks like as an organization. Like, I think about sales like, I got to call a guy who come a bunch of rejections. Look, I'll you real quick. I love this. Okay, 4 quadrants. You have business development reps, account executives, client sales, and account managers. I find the people that want to buy from us, BDRs. I sell them the first thing they've ever sold before account executives, highest paid position in a company, usually makes as much or more than the VP levels. Client sales, I sell additional stuff there to the same company, and then account managers manage that relationship. That whole thing does not exist anywhere in the military. Any one of those is a different career path. They need to explain that, not just to military, but to salespeople in general. And also, here's a strange thing about sales most people don't realize. Sales is the only job in the world that I know of that you keep the same title and you can make considerably more money every year. I can be an account executive coming in making $60,000, and a year and a half later I can be making $150,000 or $200,000 in the same role in the same company. But in the military, promotion means going into management. It means progressing from E1 to E2 to E3 to E4. There needs to be a socialization there to help them understand what a career looks like, and to be flexible with the military member when they come in and understand they all come from different backgrounds. So if you think that you know what it means for somebody to come out of the military, it's a stereotype that has to be backed out of for corporate America to start to say, this is an individual. And how do I onboard this individual to my organization? And there are going to need to be, different pieces in that maybe you would expect someone that would know. Of course, when you show up to the job that you do this and this and this, but they don't know that. Sick time, vacation time, PTO, we teach them all of that in Sales Platoon. I even talk to them about going on performance plans because that is a part of going into sales. And so it's, the detriment and the benefit of military members, there's things that we have, right? There's almost every shadow, there's a strength, and every strength, there's a shadow. The benefit of a military member is, and the challenge is, that we don't get to choose who we work for, and we don't choose who works for us. So we work for really tough bosses and really teams that we wouldn't choose to necessarily inherit, but we make it work.
Right.
that doesn't translate to the civilian world. They are not going to have that same type of, rigid, status. And preparing them for that is so critical, because that's a piece that they get lost in the fold in because they don't know what's next.
Right. That being said, I think it's a quite a, it's if you're ready to work with anyone and above you and with your level and below you, if they, because of that rigid structure, right? Mm-hmm. Then going into a corporate world where you kind of you use the same you have that skill to make it work, right? I think that's such a huge benefit, though, because in corporate world they might be put in a position that they have to work with someone, and no amount of maybe HR complaints and something like that may change the teams or what have you, depending on circumstances. But having that capability, having that ability, having that grit to work with someone when you don't have control over building your own team, I think that's still a huge benefit to a business.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because it's, again, the shadow side and the great side is that you can work inside that team. Yeah. But, learning how to deal with criticism and learning how to read between the lines. We even talked about performance plans, because in sales, other than professional athletes, no class of individuals in the world that gets paid a salary is as closely metriced as salespeople. We know how many calls you made, how long you were on the phone, how many deals, what the pipeline velocity. It's tracked. Everything, like a baseball statistic, is tracked. And so, but you're going to end up on these plans, and it's like, what do you do when that happens? How do you exit them? How do you work with your boss? How do you, what are the mores? What are the things that I need to know? What's appropriate to ask? How to negotiate salary? And the other one that their military members have a really hard time with, especially ones that it was like me, it's a lot of we team. The I's don't make it, and so, but in the civilian world, when you're in an interview, you've got to learn how to translate your strengths, and it can be for conversation, and it's like, if you study body language, right? You ever watch, typified people and like body spaces negotiated, and you can watch them do a dance around a room because, and it's like, same thing happens in the civilian world where, they're both talking, but neither one of them are hearing what they're saying. Right. And so taking them through, a process to, sales is important. You learn the methodology, then you learn how to do it. And then you learn how it works inside an organization. And then, but we spend a lot of time talking about like career planning, thinking about the next step. What do you want this to look like? What does your 6 month, 1 year look like? Like, I drilled it down for these guys so that they have an annual plan, a quarter plan, a monthly plan, a weekly plan, and a daily plan. So they know what to do on a daily basis, metrics and numbers, and then how do they do a monthly review and hold themselves accountable for these strategic goals. So we teach very similar to the way that I taught in the military, but I break it down in civilian terms so they know, like, I wake up in the morning, write the head trash out. What are my goals for the day? What am I grateful for? What are my top 3 things? Do they check in? At the end of every week, they send, what did I learn? What do you need from me? At the end of every month, they send a complex, real simple 5 questions. What'd you say you were going to do? How'd you do? What'd you learn? What are you going to do differently? And what do you need from me? Right. And they learn how to start tracking goals and breaking them into things, because it's hard for sometimes our military members to think about goals that aren't listed, that need to be decided upon, so that, and again, it's just the thing I teach is like, if my quote is 50,000, don't set your quote at 50,000, set it at 70,000. Reverse engineer the numbers and hold yourself accountable to those standards. And then how do you do that? And so giving them a methodology and a framework for that starts to prepare them so that when they go into the team, that they can hit the ground running and they can take the product and learn how to utilize that within a structure and a process. If that tracks or makes sense.
What kind of approaches have you tried to pitch this to businesses? What would a success look like for you? I know you mentioned 1,000 veterans in a year placed in businesses, right? So that's kind of like one goal that you have. What do you need in order to make that happen? Yeah,
what we need is for CE, like right now what we do is we target, So the 4 phases: phase 1, boot camp, in-doc, right? Washes people out. Phase 2, sales engagement training. Phase 3 is their like engagement. So they are truly running a regular sales regimen every morning, metrics. But their target audience is CEOs, VPs of sales, and senior leadership who have military backgrounds, who understand what that transition is like. Because the idea is, if you can't set a meeting with a CEO at a small company who was also Marine, you're probably not going to make it selling the ins and outs of synthetic DNA to a lab pilot. You're going to have to, like, it's at least an in. So what we need is, for those, if you've been in the military or you're interested in getting the diversity inclusivity that comes from hiring the military, we need those companies that have these sales roles to say, to outreach and say, you know what, we're willing to have the conversation with you. Because we start everything with what we call a ground truth assessment, or another military term. But I don't, it's important for me to understand that the business is military ready before I give them a candidate. So do you have an onboarding process in place? Is it defined? Are there metrics tied to it? Is it an apprenticeship? Do you have steps for them to follow? What does success look like the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? If you don't have that, then that's a big win for you just to learn that. So we can engage and have that conversation and figure that out very quickly. So we need for the CEOs of these companies to say, you know what, I do want to have a different source of sales hiring that isn't reliant only on collegiate. Supplement it. Challenge yourself to bring these military members in, because the de-risking occurs in sales platoon. We're selective by nature. It is a rigorous coursework. This is a lot of commitment that they're putting into it and that we're putting into it, so that when they show up, they're going to know a lot more than the average candidate who's coming through a 4-year degree program. So, it's the company saying, we have seats on the airplane. The military members, it's also hard there too, honestly, because they don't understand what it means to have a career in sales. And that little thing I just did for you on that, when I have conversations all day long. I have probably 2, 3, sometimes up to 5 conversations through Veterati or outreach to veterans or reaching out to groups around what a career in sales is, and getting them to understand and unlearn what they think they know about what it is, and understanding that this is truly an adventure of a lifetime, where it's self-directed. It's, you truly are the master of your own fate, captain of your own soul, and that you want the great equalizer. It is selling. It is irrespective of a lot of the things that background and different circumstances of life can barrier. Sales is not one of those. If you can close and you can figure out how to do that, you can learn it. Like, to be a great wide receiver, you have to be born with talent and a certain quickness, but you can develop yourself into being a good lineman. That is a skill set that you learn through drills and repeated actions. It's like that with sales. So we need those companies to say, you know what, we'll do that. We believe in what you're trying to do, but we also believe that this is going to solve a business problem for us. And so those companies to reach out and say, because what I need is, we need to know the seats on the airplane. Because it doesn't do me any good to go and get 1,000 military members to come through our training and then to go get placed only for them to have nowhere to go.
Right.
I need companies that are willing to say, we might not need them right now, but to get military ready, this certainly makes sense for investment for organization. It's going to help us in any role that we bring on, whether they're IT or coders or whatever it is. This is a great bridge program. The sales platoon can come in and help us just to look at it and see, are we military ready? But now we talk about sales candidates. You don't know when sales attrition is going to occur, but sure as death and taxes, it will. And are you ready for when that happens? So it's almost like an insurance policy that you're buying to have access to be able to tap into this different set of revenue. So when I go out to the skill bridge candidates and I go out to that Lance Corporals coming out in 6 months and go, you know what, bud, I don't know where you're going to end up yet, but I can guarantee you one thing. I got 100 companies that have signed up that said they'll take you. And when you get to the point where you're in phase 3, we're going to have you start interviewing with these companies. And we're going to put you out there so you can find the right one. And that's what we need right now.
The upside is so clear, and just so the numbers are just staggeringly overwhelming in your favor in terms of what you bring to the table. The companies, like you originally initially told us, when they have that sales gap, it's a not even gap. It's a vacuum. It sucks in resources as you're trying to bring and onboard another person. Having that connection with ready to go, well trained, 14 weeks, really well structured and comprehensive from what I can tell just talking to you and looking at your website, training regiment, and people who are ready trained and in service for years who are kind of living that kind of regiment, and now this transference happens into this sales model. I think you'd have to be foolish not to take advantage of that, because and you have it's almost like, there was an interview, let's say, for a sales position. There's a great resume. Someone comes out of a college, whatever. Maybe they didn't have any experience, but let's say they sold themselves. And now the company is really investing forward on that individual, trusting that they will actually perform well. Over here, you're bringing something that, through the 14 weeks of training, through this regimented approach and very well structured. It's almost like the interview is happening along the way, because you're already getting them ready to for these tough times. So for me, this is a no-brainer. So I hope that if you're a company that is listening to this right now and you like what's being said over here, you need to reach out to Raleigh and really take advantage of this amazing program that he's building out. What is a shout out? Do you want to this is your shout out time right now? What do you want to convey to those who are listening, whether it's a company, a CEO, or if it's a veteran, or even maybe, what is the message you want to kind of send out to folks right now to kind of sum up what we've been talking about for this past hour?
Yeah, I think the main thing is, like in sales, you're doing one of two things. You're either disturbing the comfort or comforting the disturbed. It's the two things that you're doing. And so when we're talking right now, it should be disturbing you some if you're a CEO to think about what are we going to be doing to solve this problem, which is going to be attrition. When we start to grow and I start to have to hire and backfill this, there's a real business problem that's being solved. But, again, you did such a great job of articulating like what our passion is, because I did this across 20 years in, a dozen different companies and, hundreds, if not probably close to 1,000 reps. So the process works. But what if we can take and add a layer on that and say, what about our military veterans and all the discipline, the loyalty, the drive, the determination, the grit, and then take them and then infuse them with a skill set that is very specific to your business around B2B sales, and then put them in your organization. Like, I know the challenge. I know that, it's like, I don't understand the military. I don't really know what that means. Look, that's why I started this company, because I do. I'm not a guy who just, has an affinity for the military and hopes I can make the transition. I made the transition and I have a debt. So part of that is giving this back to these guys. But the other side of that is that it's not like I had 1 year sales experience and decided to start a sales training company. Like, I did this for almost 20 years and I failed a lot. So I know what it takes to build. I know how hard the job of that frontline manager is. You put all those things together and then you get the ability to truly make a difference. I should have been marginalized 100 times along the way. If it hadn't been for a career in sales and people who took an interest in me, I could have been a different statistic. And so I don't for a second think that, I don't owe a huge debt to those people. And I hope that the people that are hearing this would say, geez, if I could do that, if I could impact that person's life. When I watched young salespeople, meaning young in their careers, come through a training, whether where I was at, NASDAQ or MarketWired or any of these small companies, and they got it. And the moment they went from, I don't know how to even approach a phone call, to I have now brought a compelling business case to this organization that did not even know they had a problem, and I solved a business issue, and it's better for that company. I leave that company better than I left it, and I earn money along the way. That individual will never go hungry again. You have just changed a generation of people. That person's generation, the person before them, because most of us coming out of the military, we're not going back to above average income families that have, a lot of opportunities. This was our opportunity. The military for me was a saving grace. When I went in, it was the military, the monastery, and my grandmother said she wasn't sure the monastery would have me. So when I got out of the military and made this transition, it's like you have an opportunity to truly transform their lives. But when you transform one life, you transform an entire generation behind it. And our military, most of us, we don't want handout. We don't want help. I just want an opportunity. And so what we need is the companies that are willing to answer the challenge and say, I'll raise my hand. I'll be the CEO that's willing to take one of these guys in, because I believe that story. Because, it's my story. And if I can do it, they can do it. And if you can transform those lives and improve your bottom line, it's a win for everybody.
Raleigh, I couldn't say it better myself. I think you summed it up so beautifully. And Sales Platoon, check it out. Salesplatoon.org is Raleigh's website, and this is something that is very comprehensively designed. And hopefully you're with us for this whole podcast, because Raleigh just downloaded a lot, dropped a lot of knowledge, right? And you can find out more on his website and follow the story, what he said, connect with that, and transform your company so that it's not only veteran friendly but veteran ready. And Raleigh, with that, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah.
I know you're going to succeed in scaling this up. You're ready. What you've built, what you made available, and you built this foundation, and what you started is already a huge success, because I don't believe anybody else done it to the extent that you and to the comprehensiveness that you've done. Now it's just a matter of scaling this up. So it's going to be a matter of spreading this message, make companies aware of this, and take advantage. And again, connect with Raleigh. Salesplatoon.org is his website. And thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate being here.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to a podcast with interesting people. Please subscribe and leave a review or comment.
And support us by sharing our episodes on social media. We really appreciate it. And for more information, visit us at apodcast.com. Thanks.